Before we begin, thank you very much to 13 black trash bags of G1 Topspin toys for joining the Patreon campaign. I do love that people have figured out the hack now, that like you'd throw $1 at me and I will say whatever you want, like the monkey on the crank thing. I appreciate it. However or why ever you contribute, I do appreciate it. This marks 100 shoutouts in a row, by the way. That is an absolute crazy amount of people supporting the channel. Even if you jump in and out, even if you just dump $1 on me to get me to say something dumb and then leave, I really do appreciate it. All of that goes into keeping the channel afloat and keeping the daily content coming. Thank you guys so much for being so generous. So because we had a weird day today, because we're celebrating 100 shoutouts in a row, let's talk about something a little bit goofy. And when we talk goofy and Transformers, that really does just lead us down to Waspinator. So I got curious the other day, just how many times was Waspinator scrapped? And I don't just mean he got blasted, because all the Predacons got blasted in funny ways. I don't mean just like normal combat stuff or things that happen to all of the Predacons, you know. All of them caught the backside of Rhinox in the low road. All of them got swept away in one way or another, during various episodes now that I think about it. Point being, I wanted to see all of the prime examples of exactly what happens to Waspinator of all Predacons, the ones that were done to comedic effect to really push our pity on the poor bug. So let's take a look at all those, shall we? The first time we run across this was Chain of Command. This was Rhinox putting out his chain guns of doom to their most effective use, I feel. This shredded Waspinator, like parts were falling off just from bullets hitting him. And if it wasn't bad enough that he was getting shot like literally 1,000,000 times, he also gets backed up into the alien device, which causes him to start shorting on top of all this. Bad day for Waspinator, to say the least. But hey, the worst days are yet to come. This is gentle compared to some of the scrappings. The next one was in Guerrilla Warfare. Now, every Predacon got scrapped in this one in one way or another, but this one was particularly special for Waspinator. Primal bursting out of the wall like a horror movie villain and dragging Waspinator in before just throwing him through another wall. It's one of the more comedic ones. I like this one. It's also a little bit horrific that Primal's capable of that. Just saying. We have one in Dark Designs where a cargo crate gets turned into a makeshift wrecking ball to smack Waspinator as hard as Rhinox possibly can. This one is a little bit different because technically Waspinator did not go down from this. No. I think he had as close to a concussion as Transformers get. He spent the rest of the episode buzzing around thinking that in random directions, thinking he was shrapnel, which was actually one of the very first times we got to hear any connection to G1 in Beast Wars, was the mention of Decepticon shrapnel. Also he called himself Wonko the Sane, which is a fandom reference from the time. So comedic, certainly, but not like a full scrapping, but we're gonna count it. The Spark. This one is a little bit underrated. So he gets caught in what seems to be an energon geyser, and I mean it looks pretty nasty. It looks pretty nasty. The energon surges alone look nasty, and then there's the rough landing that came afterwards as well. Not as grandiose, but hey, this is still early. This is still early in Waspinator's career. He's got a long way to go yet. Let's talk about the Trigger Part 1. Now, this one really shouldn't count because Pterosaur caught this too, but I feel like it's so over the top that it is specifically a Waspinator style blasting, so we're going to include it. No, the Spire blasts him at full power with this big nuclear Dragon Ball Z beam. And yeah, you can see parts flying off. He fell down in several pieces. So I think that counts. I think that counts, even if Pterosaur shared the fate on that one. He got blasted again, both of them did, in Trigger Part 2. Not nearly as severely, though. So we're going to chalk this one up to the list and leave the other one to just a normal blasting. Because this is the funny one. This is the comedically over-the-top one. We'll move on to Spider's game, where his wings were clipped by Air Razor. This one is fairly tame, because Waspinator, for the most part, stays intact. The comedic part comes from the fact that he head plants face down into the dirt, into this pose, which is very undignified. But, hey, whoever accused Waspinator of having dignity in the first place, so I think that's fair. Either way, one of the more tame ones, but definitely one that's suited for him. Dark Voyage also had one that's kinda iffy. Like, early Season 1 stuff, they weren't really, like, going too over the top with how Waspinator got finished off for the episode, but they were still, like, putting some extra emphasis on what happened to him. For instance, in this episode, he gets blasted and set on fire. It's the only time I'd ever saw just a normal shot from a Maximal set a Predacon on fire in the entire series. And he goes down in a flaming burst, skidding and tries to turn up and just ends up skidding across the river like a stone. Well, at least it put him out from the fire, right? Right? The biggest one to this point, probably the biggest ever, because we didn't even see how many pieces he ended up in after this one, was in Possession. Now, this is technically Starscream, but it's still Waspinator having to deal with it and having to get repaired. No, he's caught in an explosion of raw energon. So one of the rare times of the show we found out just how volatile raw energon could be. And yeah, it's a huge blast. It's an absolutely gigantic blast. And very commendable Waspinator survived it, because much smaller blasts will take out much better, stronger Transformers later on in this series. Yeah, he's a survivor, somehow. Law of the Jungle. So, in this episode, it's comedic enough that Waspinator's flying around with this giant cluster bomb. And previously they were working to good effect, but when he gets jumped by Tigatron, he drops one. And the one he dropped just happened to activate and start blasting him apart. So, yes, he's blasted by his own cluster bomb, which is fine. It's fine. He stayed intact for the most part. Give him credit on this one, because he got blown up several times and was still mostly in one piece. So good for him. Tarantulas is responsible for the one after this in Before the Storm. And I love how comedic this one is, because not only does he like trick him into like a chamber to do it, the bomb is very much like a Wile E. Coyote Looney Tunes kind of like dynamite bomb with a timer on it. And this is a great bit of throwback classic cartoon comedy from Beast Wars that they do every so often. We don't really get to see what happened to Waspinator. We just know that the blast was big enough to rock the chamber he was inside at the time. So I'm going to assume it's pretty bad. Going to assume it was pretty bad. Don't worry. It's walked away from worse. We haven't even gotten to some of the worst ones yet. So, what was next? This is another one I almost didn't include because it's not a proper scrapping, but it is Waspinator being unfortunately dealt with, shall we say. This was in Other Voices #1, where he was guarding the alien construct, trying to secure the area. Rat Trap has problems with that, but they have a ceasefire going on, so no one can shoot anyone. But remember, in Beast Wars, the ceasefire was as literal as possible. Punching each other was perfectly fine. So they had like an actual brawl. And Rat Trap fights dirty. He kicks Waspinator in the lug nuts. Proceeds to noogie him and then gives him another punt up the butt. It's another undignified way of another undignified day for Waspinator. Most days are undignified for Waspinator. So yeah, he didn't get blasted, didn't get blown up, didn't get shredded or anything like this. No, 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 no. Rat Trap just beat the oil out of him is what he did. But to great comedic effect, so we're going to include it. Let's see. Next up, what was the next one? Oh right, Coming of the right. Coming of the Fusors, Part 1. So this is the chamber with the golden discs, and Waspinator is the one guarding it when Dinobot invades the Predacon base. Waspinator wants to work together to get the discs from Dinobot, but Dinobot decides to just throw Waspinator into the security field, which instantly starts electrocuting him horribly, I might add. And if that's not enough, it's not enough that the energy field has like seized Waspinator and is violently electrocuting him. Then a magnet acts up. Then a magnet turns on and starts ripping scrap parts off of Waspinator. Not the entirety. He didn't rip him into total bits. He just ripped off specific pieces that were apparently loose. Not that I think Waspinator is entirely welded together at any particular point. And when that was done, the scrap parts were deposited into a container. The rest of the Waspinator, still intact, was dumped into a container. And the entire thing was trash compacted, bounced up, bounced off the magnet, and ends up in a perfect little cube somewhere in the middle of a hallway in the Decepticon base, in the Predacon base, in the form you see here. And guess what? He's still functional. He just got blurred, but he's still functional. Functional enough to talk and complain about it. Functional enough to have one arm to just kind of drag himself back to the CR chamber. Or I guess in the Predacon base, the restoration tank. This might be my favorite because this is by far the most over the top. There's like by far the most set pieces went into this one, to an absolutely ridiculous degree. The next one is in Tangled Web, and there's not much to say about this one because we only get the illusion that it happened. In this episode, they're being tasked with setting up jamming stations, and yeah, as soon as he's ready to report the successful completion of one, it falls over, and we cut to static before we actually see what happens. But we can see from this screenshot, it's not going to end well for him. It's admittedly it's one of the weakest ones. It's one of the weakest ones, but it does technically count because it's another really bad day for Waspinator. A lot of days are bad for Waspinator. Case in point. This was in Maximal No More. So Rat Trap pretended to be Quick Strike from behind a rock, and he threw Waspinator what looked to be one of his like forearm grenades, one of his like his blast charges. It wasn't. It sprayed a gas at Waspinator, and it caused him to freak out. So apparently, Rat Trap was dealing in chemical weapons today, but it locked him. It made him do this. It locked him up with his head turned around the opposite direction, and then he just falls over like he's in stasis lock. Once again, raising the question: why didn't you mass produce that and just gas the whole Predacon base? Why not? Why not? Other than like that's not really a very good guy thing to do, but hey, it'd work. It would work. It's one of the more weird ones because it's the only time Rat Trap ever employs something like this. Normally, he'd just blow Waspinator up, which also would have been funny. Oh, sudden but glorious. The agenda part 2. Waspinator is reporting to a spot Megatron ordered him to, and it just happened to be in the way of Black Arachnia flying stasis pod just when she was distracted with making out with Silverbolt. Yeah, this is probably the most pieces I've ever seen Waspinator in. He flew and rains down like water. Sudden and yet hilarious. Yeah, I like this one too. I believe this is the one where afterwards he's just a head mounted on his own hand, who has to like put himself back together from that somehow. Oh, and he does by the time they get to by the time they get to season 3. He's got himself back together. All right, Cutting Edge, probably one of the more humiliating ones. When a Cyberraptor goes out of control, it just violently starts stomping on Waspinator over and over and over again, and then it explodes. It's bad enough Waspinator blows up a lot. To blow up after being stomped on by something with razors for feet? No, that's a little bit worse. It's a little bit worse. Go with our Feral Scream Part 2. This is the one where I have no idea how he made it back. There should be no coming back from this. Everything but his head was literally shredded by Dinobot 2. He's Linguini. This is like the most brutal one. Like, okay, there's the magnet smashy thing. Like, it's really brutal. But this is literally like, there's nothing left, man. It's just his head. Somehow he survived this too. Like, because Waspinator's the funny one, he can survive anything. He's immortal. Like, he's got, like, no wonder Starscream possessed him. They probably have the same, like, immortal tick to their spark or something. See. Go with the flow, probably the most embarrassing one. I've said that before, but this one really was. When he was trying to kidnap Una, she was taught to hack at the hinges, so that's what she did the entire flight home. She hacked at Waspinator's hinges. Even the ones that you couldn't see in beast mode. Just hack the hinges, to the point where he got Una to the Predacon's little hideaway for the giant laser just in time to completely fall apart. And I don't think he makes a comeback in this episode. I think he's just in parts for the rest of the episode. I mean, why not? Master Blaster. Waspinator serving as distraction whether he knows it or not, and literally gets clapped by Optimus Primal into a little two-dimensional piece of paper type Waspinator who floats down. It's very comedic. It's very funny. You can tell, like, the scrappings in season 1 are nothing like the scrappings in season 3. Season 3, they didn't care if it was feasible for Waspinator to somehow survive. They just did whatever they thought was funny. All right? And credit to them. Like, they saved the best for last. They saved some of the funniest ones for last. But the final one of the whole series was Nemesis Part 1, where he gets blasted into bits by Quickstrike and Inferno from behind after he quit the Predacons. So, okay. Maybe not quit right in front of 2 trigger-happy comrades of yours. Might have not been the best career choice, but funny one. Yeah, this is the last time he gets scrapped. And, of course, he gets pulled back together either himself or by the proto-humans, one or the other. But this is the last time. Like, we see Waspinator in the final episode in the last shot. Happy at last. And then Beast Machines ruins it. But we're talking about that in another video series right now. At the moment, no. That is all of the, like, special scrappings of Waspinator. My count was 20. And in my head, it's like he's like the Transformer version of Kenny from South Park. We find a way of killing him every single episode. But no. Like, he spent half the episodes mostly intact. Don't get me wrong. He got shot down. He got hit by a tree once. But none of that felt like a proper Waspinator beating, right? All that just kind of felt like, in the moment, same thing that happened to any Predacon. So we didn't throw those in. If we threw in literally every time he got blasted or scrapped in some way, we'd have another 20 minutes in this video, let's be honest. Instead, we're going to cut it there. So thank you for joining me. I hope this was enlightening, or at least refreshing for people who want to go back and find their specific scrapping. Also, apologies to anyone who clicked on this video thinking it was going to be a montage of all the times that he got scrapped. We don't do that here on this channel because I like to not get DMCA'd. But for those who enjoyed it, I'm happy you enjoyed it. I'm happy you did. And I will see you next time.
It's the bosun's turn. He's looking at TJ's character and he's just like, "What you gonna do?"
I blew him a kiss.
I love him. I love him.
What's your problem? He's just gonna pull his hand crossbow and just fire at you.
That's fair at this point.